in the middle of all of this jargon is actually, what happens with personalization is sometimes you reaffirm a bias, right? Let's say, for example, today, boss, I do loans against shares and loans against mutual funds, right? Average Joe on the road, you talk to him, who has more shares or mutual funds? If you ask him, boss, is it the guy in Bangalore or is it the guy in Hubli Dharwad? The average answer will be Bangalore. Today, 55% of my loans, capital market based pledged loans, are coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities, which is a huge, at least shocker to a lot of people. But sometimes with personalization early on, right, I'm going to go ahead and implement that bias that here the consumer is accessing me from a tier 2, tier 3 city. His bank account is registered, his IFSC code is in the tier 2, tier 3 city. So I don't even think he has a portfolio. Even if he does have a portfolio, maybe the risk is going to be a little bit higher. Maybe I should go ahead and charge him higher interest rate, higher processing fees, give him the lender of last resort, right? And that is incredibly unhealthy, right? So there's a high chance that a lot of time personalization can really reaffirm terrible biases. But as long as you are ethical in strategizing it, then it should be okay.
Okay. So a follow-up question to that
Yes.
is that they are sharing all the data
Yeah.
to you and you are personalizing, but provided there is an ethical layer that is possible, do you think all the companies kind of have this, or do you think the ones that do stand out, or how do you think this is evolving?
It's impossible to say that all companies have it, right? By nature. And I think that's good, right? There's always competition to get better. But the companies that do it eventually stand out for the right reasons. If you're going to go ahead and access the most personal data, see, for example, you come on a loan aggregator platform, a credit platform, and you give them an account aggregator consent. What that platform is able to do from day 0 to day 365 is poke into your bank statement at any time, right? That is the most personal information I can imagine. So when that seems to be the case, I think you just have to be really ethical in the way that you devise your technology. There's a lot of data points over there where I can misutilize, it can be misutilized. But as long as you hold firm, you make sure that you report yourself ethically to the regulator. You make sure that the regulator is this overarching parent or god that, boss, I'm doing everything right by you, right by the people of this country. Then eventually, the team is kind of set in a way that this is what we can do, this is what we should not do. And in the middle is efficiency.
Okay. Okay. So I wanted to understand, the ethical considerations, Karthik and Abhishek. So what are the most effective strategies that you've used to, balance personalization with, customer trust?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one, Gautam. So I'll probably contextualize it a little bit before I answer, right? There was a survey that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers about 2 years back that said that 82% of consumers actually are willing to share personal data in exchange for getting a personalized service. Marry that with another data point where Accenture did a study which says that 91% of consumers are more likely to buy from a brand which knows them, which understands them, and which gives them personalized offers. So the reason for sharing this data is that if a brand is able to use personalization in the right manner, they can actually build a relationship with the consumer far beyond a transaction that's happened. Something far more meaningful, something far more deep. The way I think about this is to build personalization strategies. Broadly, I would say there are three pillars in which I would construct personalization strategies, right? The three pillars are: first is building awareness, right? What I mean by that is that as a brand, you have to be completely aware and be mindful of the entire external ecosystem that you're working with, right? So whether it is the legal framework, the regulatory framework, or the ethical, what is ethically right or wrong to do, as well as what is technically feasible to do in terms of data and tools that are available, right? So if you think about regulation, right, you could be a company that is present in one country, your consumers could be in another place. Across these two geographies, are you regulated, or are you under the purview of, let's say, GDPR or CCPA or e-privacy laws, right? So that awareness is, I think, the first element. Like, what are you legally bound by from a framework or perspective? The second one, of course, is ethical, right? Like, what is right and wrong to do from a consumer lens, right? That's also very important to know. And the third one, of course, is depending on the tools and processes that are there in your internal or external market, what is actually feasible to do. While this is largely external, from an internal point of view, all brands and companies are trying to build a CDP or a consumer data platform, right? And as you think about your CDP, the three big questions is A, what is the source of your data? Like typically you have first party data that flows into a CDP. You could also have a third party data, which, or you could have some enrichment to your first party data that could be happening. Second is what is the quality of the data, right? Is it like, especially when it's third party data, what is the veracity of the data? How verified is the third party provider? And third and most important part is your personalization engines and reco algorithms are actually using what amount of this data and they're feeding into that engine, right? So both the external awareness and the internal data awareness is extremely critical. And the third layer of building awareness, I would say, is that as you're building your systems and processes, especially if you're a younger brand or a startup, like you have to be building privacy first. It shouldn't be an afterthought that comes saying that, hey, I built my systems and processes, and now there's a plugin of how do I think about user privacy, right? So as you're building your systems and processes, think about privacy first. And that I would say is the entire piece or pillar around building awareness. The second pillar I would say is building trust, right? Because as you're taking consumer data, it is extremely important to build trust in the minds of the consumer, right? Things like what data are you taking from me? How are you going to use this data? Where are you storing this data? What is your goal seek in terms of the personalization? Should be very upfront and clear. And the nuance, Gautam, here is not in the what, it's in the how. Because if you look at the way all of this is communicated to a consumer today, it's behind 10,000 words on a privacy form that somebody just accepts and moves ahead, or it is behind some data notice which people just say that, okay, I don't have the time to read it. So how can we be mindful in terms of making this more and more aware to a consumer, at least in terms of, what is my goal seek when it comes to the personalization engine that I'm running? And all of those goals should be tied around better consumer experience and not say manipulation or trying to missell, right? The third pillar I would say is building consumer journeys and experience, right? And that's the critical element, right? And when I think about the third pillar, right, see, the consumer has given something very dear and important, which is their personal information to us, right, as a brand. And when you think about how to use it, right, there is a spectrum of over personalization versus under personalization. And to find that right balance, one needs to think about, okay, how am I going to use this data better, right? So ideally, when you are running your personalization engines, you have to be looking at cohort level or segment level data rather than personally identifiable information, right? So the cohort could be anything. It could be demographic, geographic, interest based, etc. But that's what you want to use, right? And as a brand, when you think of some content that you have, it is in a particular format, it is on a particular distribution platform. But always think consumer backwards, right? What is the consumer journey going to be on that platform, right? What is the intent of that consumer? What is the context in which the consumer is consuming that content? That will actually define how your personalization strategy comes about, right? And to give you a very simple example, right? And maybe it's an oversimplification, but still, I'll go with it. Is that, let's say you're buying international travel tickets, right? And when you're on the, let's say, the website, the app to buy international travel tickets, if me as a service provider of insurance will obviously try and sell you, let's say, travel insurance, because the context of the consumer is him trying to buy, let's say, international travel, right? My high margin products could be two-wheeler, four-wheeler insurance or any other kind, but if I understand the context better, I can personalize better, right? More importantly, when should I personalize, right? If the consumer is sticky into that journey, do I do it when he's consuming or trying to finish off his transaction? Do I do it after he's done the purchase of the tickets? Or if my database says that 10 days before date of travel is when people actually purchase travel insurance, should I send him a nudge or a reminder then, right? So understanding the context of that consumer actually helps you to define your strategy in a much better manner. So understanding these three pillars, I think, would help you define your personalization strategies much better.
Okay, that's pretty interesting because companies tread on a very fine path, like monetization, and then hyper personalization is also very difficult from a technology standpoint of view, right? So like say somebody is booking a ticket for next week, do you have a different way, like add travel insurance checkbox at the end, versus somebody is buying a ticket 2 months from now? So what do? You just remove it, or just leave it as it is, and then
Yeah.
do the follow up later? So that part.
Yeah, so Gautam, that's actually that's the holy grail, is what I would say, right? Because there is no right answer. Like, that's the very honest point of view, right? And personalization is largely about doing a lot of testing, right? You have to keep doing a lot of testing to see, and a lot of A/B tests to see what's working, what's not working. For example, do I test this? Let's say, for example, personalized offer at this stage at the cart level. Do I do it at some other level? Now let's say if you're working on a test, after you get statistically significant results, you know whether you can scale this or not, right? And then you know that that test is working or not. The best part is, it's not just the context or the offer that can change, it's the consumer behavior that can also change and evolve over time, right? So I think personalization, especially when a brand or company is trying to build it, needs to be rigorously tested and tested again and again to see what's working best. And it's only then you get the best results of marrying what's best for the consumer and what's best for the brand.
So strategy working today, probably 2 months from now, it can become
Absolutely.
outdated.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.